The house stood on the edge of the village, a skeletal monument to a past no one dared to speak of. Its windows, like empty sockets, stared out from under a tangle of ivy, and its front door sagged on rusted hinges, a gaping mouth silently screaming. For 70 years it had been shunned, a place whispered about in hushed tones by the villagers, who called it the ghost house. They told tales of a wartime secret, of people hiding within its walls during the dark days of World War II, only to vanish into thin air. No one had ever returned. When Edward Harris, a man whose face was a roadmap of forgotten battles and whose gait was a testament to years of endurance, bought the decaying property, the villagers' warnings were a chorus of fear and pity. "The house is haunted. Mr. Harris," an old woman pleaded, her voice trembling. "They say whoever goes in never comes back out." But Edward had seen enough ghosts in his life to not be afraid of a few more. He simply tipped his hat and offered a tired smile. "Some things are worth facing," he said, and with that he walked through the threshold. Inside, the air was thick with the dust of ages and the scent of decay. He found strange carvings on the walls, etched with a desperate hand. "We are here forever," they declared over and over, a chilling litany of despair. At night, the house came alive. Whispers slithered from the cracks in the walls, footsteps echoed in empty hallways, and phantom cries for help ripped through the silence, a symphony of suffering that begged him to unlock a door he couldn't find. He stayed, not out of foolish bravery but out of a deep, abiding stubbornness. He had faced foes far worse than unseen spirits, and he wasn't about to be driven from his home by a few bumps in the night. But the house had a patience that outlasted his resolve. One morning, the village awoke to find the door of the ghost house standing ajar, swaying in the breeze. A lone teapot sat cold on the kitchen table, and Edward's coat was draped over a chair, as if he had just stepped out for a moment. But Edward Harris was gone, and on the wall, beneath the frantic, decades-old carvings, a new line was etched. A single final declaration: "I, Edward Harris, am here forever." The old woman who had warned Edward Harris was the first to find the new etching. Her heart sank, a familiar, cold dread settling in her bones. She didn't need to step inside to know what had happened. The ghost house had claimed another. Its silence was no longer a sign of its abandonment, but a testament to its hunger. The villagers, already wary, now avoided the road leading to the house entirely. A young journalist, fresh from the city with a hunger for a story and a healthy dose of skepticism, arrived a few months later. He had heard the whispers, read the sparse reports, and decided to uncover the truth. The villagers' warnings were a challenge to him, not a deterrent. He scoffed at their superstitions, convinced there was a logical explanation for the disappearances. He found the new line on the wall and took dozens of photographs. He interviewed the old woman, who tearfully recounted her final conversation with Edward. The journalist, however, didn't believe in ghosts. He believed in history, and he began to dig into the house's past. He discovered that the house had belonged to a reclusive family during the war. They were known to be avid collectors of rare artifacts. The journalist found old, dusty records of a clandestine group that had used the house as a hideout for a secret resistance network. The group's mission was to protect something of immense value, a secret so important that they would rather disappear than let it fall into the wrong hands. The writings on the wall, "We are here forever," took on a new, more tragic meaning. It wasn't a curse, but a vow. They were protecting their secret, even in death. The journalist, his curiosity now an obsession, found a hidden cellar beneath the house. He saw no ghosts, heard no whispers, only the dust and the quiet hum of history. He uncovered a false wall, and behind it a small dark room. The room was empty, save for a single small wooden box. Inside, he found a delicate compass, its needle spinning wildly, and a map drawn on a piece of brittle, yellowed paper. He realized what the resistance group had been protecting. It wasn't a treasure, but a portal, a doorway to another time, another place. A single step on a certain spot of the floor and the world would warp. The air would shimmer and he would be gone forever. He was so close, so very close to his grand discovery. He could feel the truth vibrating in the air around him. The whispers he had dismissed, as a figment of a terrified villager's imagination, now seemed to be coming from the room itself. Not cries of fear, but of warning. They were begging him to stop, to not make the same mistake they had. He ignored them. He was a man of science, of logic, of proof. He wasn't afraid of the unknown, he was fascinated by it. He took a final step into the room, his eyes on the spinning compass, his mind racing with the possibilities. The door to the room slammed shut behind him. His final panicked scream was quickly silenced by the shifting air. The villagers found the journalist's car parked outside a few days later. They shook their heads, their fears confirmed. The ghost house had claimed another, but this time there was no new line on the wall. The house, it seemed, had decided it was no longer a place of warning. It was a place of permanent residence. The villagers looked at the door to the house, and for the first time, a new chill went down their spine. What if the people who disappeared were not trapped inside, but had simply found a new home? What if they were waiting for more to join them? For another 20 years, the house remained untouched. The villagers' warnings, once a desperate plea, had become a quiet, accepted truth. No one went near it. The road to the house was overgrown, a faint scar on the landscape, and the house itself sank deeper into the earth. Its roof caving in, its timbers groaning, the whispers were no longer heard, replaced by the howl of the wind through broken windows. The ghost house had achieved its final form, an empty, rotting corpse. Then a new family moved to the village. A young couple, an artist and a historian with 2 children. They were drawn by the village's quiet beauty and the promise of a simpler life. They heard the stories of the ghost house, but like the journalist before them, they dismissed them as local folklore. They were intrigued, not frightened. The historian, a woman named Lena, saw it as a historical puzzle waiting to be solved. Her husband, Mark, saw it as an artistic challenge, a study in decay and forgotten beauty. One afternoon, their 2 children, a boy and a girl, were playing hide and seek and found themselves at the edge of the forbidden road. The girl, adventurous and curious, saw the house as the ultimate hiding place. The boy, more cautious, begged her to stop. She laughed at his fear and ran toward the house, disappearing behind a wall of overgrown bushes. The boy waited, his heart pounding in his chest. A minute passed, then 2, then 5. She didn't come back. He ran home sobbing and told his parents. Lena and Mark, their hearts in their throats, rushed to the house. They found the overgrown path, the skeletal remains of the building, and the ominous quiet that had settled over it. Mark called his daughter's name, his voice echoing in the stillness. Lena, her mind racing, saw the new scratches on the front door, faint but deliberate. They weren't a warning. They were a message. They finally pushed open the heavy door, a new sound of protest joining the house's symphony of decay. Inside, they found the familiar carvings on the wall. "We are here forever." And the later ones, "I, Edward Harris, I'm here forever." And the last one, from the journalist they had read about in the old village newspaper, a single line scratched into the plaster. "It's not a ghost, it's a..." The historian, her mind a whirlwind of fear and analysis, saw it. The scratches on the front door were a map, not of a place but of a sequence, a series of points to be touched in a certain order. She traced them with a trembling hand, her husband and son watching with bated breath. As she touched the final point, the air around the door shimmered, and a faint hum filled the air. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and stepped through. Her husband called her name. The sound was distorted, as if coming from a great distance. He watched in horror as the shimmering air around the doorway dissipated, leaving only the rotting doorframe behind. He looked at his son, then at the house, a chilling understanding dawning on him. The house wasn't a place of death. It was a place of transformation. It took people not to destroy them, but to change them into something else. The whispers were not ghosts, but something new, something that was no longer human, but something that had been, something that was now a part of the house, a part of its very being, something that was now here forever. Mark stood frozen in the doorway, the scent of dust and ancient decay thick in the air. His son, a small figure of pure terror, clutched at his leg. He had just watched his wife, a woman of fierce logic and unwavering love, step into a shimmering void and disappear. The silence that followed was not empty. It was heavy with the weight of all the lives the house had swallowed. The house was not a place of death, as the villagers believed, but a place of transition. It was a doorway, a threshold to something else. He knew what he had to do. He had to follow her. He had to bring her back. He had to be a hero, a man who defied the impossible. But as he looked at his son's tear-streaked face, a new kind of fear, colder and sharper than any he'd ever known, gripped him. He couldn't risk leaving his child alone. He couldn't risk becoming another line on a decaying wall, another ghost in a forgotten history. He had to choose, his wife or his son, with a final desperate look into the dark. Empty void where his wife had stood just moments before. He turned and ran. He carried his son, a terrified bundle, in his arms. Away from the house, away from the path, away from the village. They didn't stop until they reached a small, isolated cabin far into the woods. He would raise his son there, away from the village's whispers and the house's hungry silence. He would tell him stories of his mother, a brilliant historian who had once stepped into a door to save a secret. He would never tell him she was gone. He would never tell him that the house had a new prisoner. As the years passed, the village forgot about the journalist, about the old war veteran, and about the young couple who had disappeared. The house continued to crumble, its secrets buried under layers of ivy and decay. But sometimes, when the wind was just right, the villagers swore they could hear a new sound coming from the house, a lullaby, faint and distorted, as if a mother was singing to her child, a song that was both a promise and a warning. We are here forever.